Thanks for everybody attending the session, Barriers to Successful Implementation of ITS. I'm Mike Holder with Gannett Fleming. I'll be your host today and moderator. We've got 5 distinguished panelists with us today, and I'll introduce them in just a minute after going through a few housekeeping things. Just a reminder to the attendees to please keep your cameras off. The session is being recorded, and an email will be sent after the session how to access the recordings. Everyone, please keep themselves muted. Remind everyone about PDHs. There is a PDH survey that you'll need to complete to receive those, and you will get a certificate, and it will be available on Whova for your records after the conclusion of the meeting. We're going to allow questions at the end of each presentation, and then we'll have a general discussion and a general time for questions after the conclusion of the presentations. Attendees can either raise their hand function on Zoom or Whova, or place the question in the chat box for addressing the panel. Attendees, I want to remind everybody that there is a $5 raffle supporting the ITSC Scholarship Fund, and the winner of that raffle receives a $100 Amazon gift card. So buy your raffle tickets if you haven't already. And just a reminder that there's a general session at 2:00 p.m. this afternoon. Please, if you can, attend that. It's on diversity inclusion. It promises to be very informative and very engaging. So thanks for that. Our first panelist, give me the pleasure to introduce Mr. Jerron Monroe, with NCDOT. Jerron Monroe has over 25 years of experience with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. During his time with the department, he's worked in various units, including construction, maintenance, incident management, and traffic operations. He previously served as the regional ITS engineer for the Triad area for approximately 12 years and managed the Traffic Operations Center and Incident Management Program. He's a 1995 graduate of North Carolina A&T State University with a BS in Civil Engineering and is a certified public manager. Our second panelist today is Mr. Rob Perry, who is a traffic engineer with SCDOT. Mr. Perry has a BS in Civil Engineering from the Citadel and is professional licensed engineer in the state of South Carolina. Rob started his professional career with the South Carolina Department of Transportation in 1999 with their Low Country Bridge Inspection team that is responsible for in-service inspections of roughly 1,000 bridges across 6 counties. Since that time, Rob has served as a field engineer during the construction of the Ravenel Cable Stay Bridge that spans the Cooper River in Charleston. In 2006, he transitioned to SCDOT's pre-construction division and served as a program manager for the upstate region. Mr. Perry has been South Carolina DOT's Director of Traffic Engineering since 2018. The third panelist today is Mr. Jed Neffenegger with the City of Raleigh. Jed works for the City of Raleigh and serves the City Traffic Engineer. The City of Raleigh is responsible for the maintenance and operations of a signal system comprised of approximately 650 signals. Prior to managing traffic engineering, Jed worked as a project engineer overseeing capital project and as a structural engineer designing bridges. He attended North Carolina State University and received a bachelor's degree in civil engineering with a construction management option. Jed has worked the engineering field for approximately 20 years. Fourth is Meredith McDermott with NCDOT. Meredith has a bachelor's degree from North Carolina State University as a registered professional engineer in North Carolina. She's been with NCDOT for almost 28 years, with most of those in the traffic operations field. She is currently serving the citizens of North Carolina as the state TSMO engineer in the Transportation, Mobility, and Safety Division. She has 2 daughters and lives in Pinehurst, North Carolina. And finishing up with our panel this morning is Ashley Panish. She's a project manager with the Charlotte DOT. Ashley is an engineering project manager for the City of Charlotte Department of Transportation. She's a graduate of UNC Charlotte and third generation Charlottean. She manages the planning design, and construction administration of intelligent transportation systems projects. She also oversees the maintenance of ITS facilities throughout the Charlotte area and a variety of fiber and miscellaneous projects within CDOT and other city departments. She is on the board of directors of ITS Carolinas and currently holds the seat of vice president. Welcome everybody to the session this morning, and I will turn it over to Jerron to start the presentation. Jerron.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holder. I'd like to say good morning, everyone. I'm gonna get ready to share my screen here. Let's see. All right, hope everybody can see my screen. All right, of course, this morning, just kind of want to, I guess for the next 10, 15 minutes, to kind of share a few things dealing with overcoming ITS barriers. I know we're talking about barriers that we deal with in the avenue of ITS, and just want to kind of share a few things that during my time in the TRAD TMC that we utilize to help to overcome some of the barriers that we face in the ITS unit. And Mr. Holder's already done the introduction, so I'm gonna skip that. And so kind of the way this presentation be done, I'll give like just a little overview of the TRAD TMC, just kind of let you know kind of our footprint. And then I'll share what I love to call about 5 nuggets that are some things that you can use or we use again to help us with overcoming ITS barriers as far as promoting your program, be creative, utilizing ITS maintenance contracts, construction projects, and also we'll be talking about interagency team meetings. And just to give you just again the overview of the TRAD TMC, TRAD TMC was kind of it covered about an 8-county region, 8-county region in the TRAD area. And if you can see, we got the counties highlighted. Of course, it was Greensboro is where the TMC was located at. We covered Greensboro, Winston-Salem area, which is Forsyth County. We covered Davidson County, which is Lexington. We also covered Davie County, which is around the Moxville area. Also Rowan County, which is down in Salisbury. We also covered Randolph County, which is where I'm seated at today. We also covered Alamance County, which is Burlington, and also Orange County, which was Hillsborough. So the TRAD area was a mixture of an urban as well as rural area. Again, we did have some pretty major cities in our area, which is Greensboro and Winston-Salem. And so again, you had a kind of a mixture of urban as well as rural counties there. Just a little bit on far as the number of devices that we managed in the TMC. We had about 87 DMS signs, that's your overhead signs that we managed across the region. We had about a little over 200 and some CCTVs that we managed. We had about 100, little over 140 some CCTVs that we had connection with the local cities, Burlington, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem, and also the city of Salisbury. We also had about over 60 some portable message signs, and I'll get into that later on. So we had a very large portable message board program that we managed. And also too, we also had portable cameras. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. That was one of our pride and joy there, that the portable cameras, but I'll talk about it a little bit more. And of course, in this slide, we added this, and of course, it gave you a picture of a color DMS sign. And so we were very happy about that. Right before I left the program back a year or two ago, we was just getting to where we was attaining the color DMS signs. And so I think outside of the Turnpike, our division or our region was one of the first to get color DMS signs. And to my understanding now, those signs are starting to be installed. And so you can see we got the nice DOT logo on there showing off that nice color DMS sign. So very proud of that. All right. So the first thing I'd like to share is to promote your program. I can't stress this enough. With overcoming ITS barriers, you have to promote your program. In other words, what I'm saying is you have to show the value of your program. And so a lot of things that we did was as a unit, we really, tried to promote our program by getting the support through our upper management. I can say I was very fortunate that I had two division engineers at the time who were very supportive of our program. And it's very helpful when you're trying to manage your ITS footprint. In addition to that, what we did was, as a unit, we worked hard on building good working relationships with the internal and our external partners. One of the things, being a little transparent, is that, when back before I came into the unit, I didn't know a lot about ITS. And so a lot of things, to be honest with you, I kind of used to badmouth the unit. Man, they don't do nothing but look at cameras, riding trucks. They don't do no work. I was in maintenance at the time. And so what happened was, when I came into the unit and when I began to gain a better understanding of the importance of the unit, then I started seeing the significance of the unit. And so what it did was, I had to also to push our program to change some of the mentality of a lot of our internal partners, because at the time, ITS was still getting its footprint into the unit, into the division or the unit or the department. And so you had a lot of, because DOT at the time was very construction and maintenance oriented. And so ITS was kind of the new kid on the block and really trying to show people our significance as far as being in part of the department. And so one of the things we did was, what we would do is we would utilize our overhead signs to help provide support to a lot of the maintenance and construction personnel. Like if they had a project coming up, we would personally reach out to them and say, hey, you got a project going on. Hey, we right here got overhead sign, and we can provide support to you. And so we kind of did that to build a relationship. So we also took over the portable message boards, as you see on the right side of the screen. We took over all the portable message boards for both divisions. And so we did was, by doing that, it allowed us to be able to provide that service to the other units. So if they had a project, we said, listen, all you got to do is call us. You ain't got to set the board up. You need, just tell us what you want to assign, we'll handle it. And so we would deploy message boards and things of that nature. And what that did in turn, it allowed us to expand our ITS infrastructure, because you can use portable message boards to put in places where you don't have DMS coverage. And we can also use it if we had a DMS sign that may have went down, that we could also use it in its place. And so it helped to expand our infrastructure. The other thing I would share, be creative. When it comes to dealing with ITS, you have to learn to be creative. One of the things we did was, back years ago, portable cameras back then, if I remember correctly, they run you about $30,000, which that's not, that's a pretty good amount of money when you're dealing with budget. And so one of the things we did was we built our own portable camera. If you look to the right of the screen, that was our first camera trailer that we built. It was actually constructed out of an old portable message board that was damaged. And what we did was we removed the old message board, and we actually placed a portable camera on it. Well, it was fine and dandy, but the only problem was it wouldn't extend but so high. And so over time, we kind of perfected the design a bit better. As you can see, the two slides to the center of the screen, also to the right, we modified the design to where we were able to extend the camera up to about 30 feet. And so we built several of these. We modified how the solar panels were mounted on it. If you look back at the original one, the way the solar panel was mounted, it didn't obtain a lot of sun. And so what we did was we built into where the panels were flat, so it obtained more sun, and it helped with keeping them more charged. And so we was able to use these in areas where we didn't have camera coverage. If we had a down camera, we was able to use these. And so we worked together with our internal staff, as well as our maintenance department. And even eventually, we even started incorporating some of our construction personnel, actually our maintenance staff, to help us construct these. And so these was one of the things that we were able to do, again, a way of being able to expand our ITS infrastructure, but save money. We built these, I think, roughly for about half the price. I think it cost us maybe $15,000 to build these. So again, it was a cost saving, but it gave us the ability to extend our ITS infrastructure. We also utilize ITS maintenance contracts. Again, anybody know who dealing with ITS, that maintenance is the key to your ITS infrastructure. And so we had contracts. We had about 3 contracts. It was PO contracts that were basically they were renewable for up to 3 years. And we had one for the cameras, the DMS sign, and we also had one for the fiber optic cable. And so pretty much through these contracts, we was able to maintain the cameras, the DMS signs, do the annual preventative maintenance that was required. And also too, it allowed us, because we didn't have a whole lot of staff. So by utilizing contract staff, it helped to allow us to have the staff we needed to provide to maintain the devices. And this is just a few photos of just some of the devices. As you can see up there to the top left-hand corner, that's actually a fiber optic box, because we've had issues where our fiber got cut. Actually, I think this might have been a picture where we had to actually cut by a mower one time. You would say, how in the world did a mower cut your fiber? But mower actually, I think, clipped the top of that lid, and that fiber is almost like in a spring. And once he clipped that box, that fiber popped up, and it was over then. So anyway, we actually had contracts to repair fiber anytime it got cut, maybe through mowers or whatever, or through projects. And so the contracts came in handy with that. And you can see again a picture of the silent DMS signs, and also you can see a damaged cabinet there that we were able to utilize our contract to be able to make these repairs. Hurry up here. Construction projects. I can't stress that enough. Utilizing construction project is a valuable tool in overcoming ITS barriers. One of the things that you see on your screen here, this was actually 3 separate projects that was here. And in each project, there were ITS devices that were slated to be put in these projects. So what happened was, working through our division personnel at the time, our division construction engineer, as well as our resident engineers, we were able to interconnect the 3 projects together. Because at the end of the day, what happened was each project had devices and fiber, but it was not connecting. And so working through the resident engineer, working through our division construction engineer, we was able to work out through the projects to extend the fiber to connect all 3 projects. And so what it did was it helped us as a unit to expand our fiber network. And so again, that was another way of utilizing and working together, building a relationship with construction personnel to be able to get our infrastructure expanded, and also in working together with the state ITS unit. Through construction projects, we've been able to obtain, again, cameras, through construction projects. We were able to get new cameras or upgrade old cameras. Again, we was able to get color DMS that came through construction projects. And if you notice at the bottom of your screen, you see this platform. One of the things we used to run into was sometime when DMS signs would go up, they would be put in areas where they were hard to maintain. And so we used to build wooden platforms. And so what we've done over the years, we was able to obtain through projects these aluminum platforms, which are a lot nicer. And so what it does was it safened up your ability to work on the ITS devices. And so again, it goes to show you how you're able to do construction projects to be able to help with your ITS infrastructure. And I think the last one is interagency teams. I can't stress this enough. Back in the tribe, we had about 8 teams that we managed, and interagency teams are very vital in your ITS infrastructure, because what it does is it allows you to utilize IMAP trucks, because IMAP trucks were able to monitor or be able to patrol areas where we didn't have devices. I always looked at IMAP trucks as being boots on the ground and giving you eyes in the areas, again, in remote areas that you did not have ITS. And so a lot of times people want to separate ITS from the IMAP program, but to me, they all one. We were all one unit. And so again, through our teams, we were able to gain support through outside agencies to expand our program. We was trying to expand into another county, and we had some of the local fire departments and law enforcement writing letters, and it helped us to be able to expand our program into other counties. And so again, I encourage you in the area of interagency teams to manage those teams, because you can gain a whole lot of support from outside agencies when it comes to expanding or overcoming ITS barriers. And that's it. I'm gonna stop right there. Hopefully I didn't go past my time. I didn't have my clock watching. I apologize if I did, but anyway, that's it. If anybody have any questions, definitely open any questions.
Thank you, Jerron. Any questions for Jerron? Once again, use the raise the hand feature or put them in the chat box. Jerron, one question I have is, and this may have been preceding your tenure there, but I'm sure that you felt some ramifications from it when you took over. But I know in the triad, there used to be 2 distinct efforts in Division 7 and Division 9 relative to ITS deployment and the TMC centers. Can you speak to a few minutes, if you have knowledge of that, about the challenge in integrating those centers or integrating the efforts of the two divisions to come up with a successful program?
Sure. Yeah, you're exactly right. We had two separate programs when we first started. When I came in the unit, Division 9 had a program and 7 had one. And so what happened was eventually the two units were united into one unit at the Triad TMC in Greensboro. And so there were some, we pretty much operated in each division the same, but yes, there were some differences. And so we had two incident management engineers, but there was one in 7, one in 9. And so what happened was we did some restructuring. And so what we did was create a TMC operations engineer, and then we had an incident manager, then we had the ITS engineer. And so there had to be some restructuring of positions. Also, it had to be some change in how we operated across the line, so we, that way we were consistent. But outside of that, to me, I feel like it did work out as a smooth transition because, again, when you had the support from the division engineers, upper management supporting the effort, it really helped when you're trying to bring something like that together. And so outside of, changing some positions and things of that nature and kind of changing a little bit of how we all operated because, again, every division operated differently. But once we kind of got everybody on the same sheet of music, then, everything kind of flowed from there. And I think it went well.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I could add, Mike,
Yes,
Jerron makes it sound easy because he's really good at that. Communication in a region like that, where you have two division engineers and potentially two different visions in your region, he did a really great job of bringing those two together. I mean, you'd attend both staff meetings and make sure that you kept in communication with everyone and a lot of work put into just making sure everybody was on the same page. And he did a great job at that.
Thanks, man.
I'll agree with that, Jerron. I was in between Division 7 and Division 9 when it first started, and then went to Division 12 shortly after. But I know that you did, like Meredith said, you did a yeoman's job, and that in itself is a challenge to successful deployment of ITS. Not only practices, but integrating the staff and getting everybody to work towards a common vision. So a huge testament to your work there. But did you have another comment before we move on?
Yeah, I was just saying, one of the things I really learned is about relationships, and I can't stress that enough. And, when you're building a program like that, with Meredith's group and our division engineers and working with, your resident engineers and your county maintenance engineers, I mean, that was the biggest thing. I mean, I'll be transparent a little bit. Yeah, there was some relationship building that needed to take place because, just like anywhere, you might have a little bad blood here and there. And so we had to really work through all that. And I think once we really started promoting and people really had a more idea of what incident management had to offer, that really helped a lot, but it took work of, saying, look, we can provide this service for you. And then after a while, it got to the place we didn't have to call them. People would call us. Hey, can we use your sign? Y'all got to. So it turned from us reaching out to them reaching out to us. And that's what you want. And that's what you want. And so then it kind of showed that, hey, we all in the same field. We all in the same playground. We all play together. And so it just went from when maintenance needed something, from sometimes rolling slowdowns and things like that, we would help. And so it just was that effort of working together is really, I can't stress it enough, that is a key to any program. You have to have that team effort to make it work.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for the information.
Yes, sir.
Next we'll turn it over to Mr. Rob Perry with a state of South Carolina perspective from the DOT there. Rob?
Hey, can everybody see my screen? I hope so.
Don't see it yet, Rob.
How about that? Got it now?
Okay, there it is. Gotcha. Got it.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. Kind of like Jerron, it's a lot of fun overseeing a large ITS infrastructure. Being a military man, I always like to touch on what our mission is. Just like most state agencies, to summarize, we're responsible for moving people and goods safely and efficiently across our state. And how are we doing? We average around 1,000 fatalities a year in South Carolina. And I always want to talk about that because I think it's important, like Jerron said, to hammer away to the leadership how this ties into reducing those fatalities or keeping them from going up, what a critical role ITS and TMCs play when it comes to that mission. As you can see, this is another kind of look. It shows our fatality rate versus VMT. Probably North Carolina and as well as the municipalities saw a jump started in 2014 when we came out of the Great Recession. And our fatality rate has hovered right around that 1.7, 1.8 area, but it's come down a little bit in the last few years. I could probably just take this slide and ball it up and throw it in a trash can because of what we've been doing the last year. But before COVID hit, we were really on an upward trend for VMT. 2020 obviously was a big decline, but our projection was a 2% increase in VMT annually. And we'd seen a big increase, kind of the previous slide from 2014 moving forward. And then COVID took place. I really like this slide, even though it's getting more confusing for me to read now that we've got 3 years of data to look at. But it kind of shows, what COVID did to VMT and just volumes. What this is a average of our continuous count stations, which are ITS infrastructure across our state. And so it really helps our upper management see, how many people are moving, as opposed to normal. So the blue line's 2019, orange was last year, and then purple is this year. But you can really see, a big reduction. I think we topped out at 49% reduction in volumes at the height of COVID when the governor issued his go to work, go home order. And then May 1st, he rescinded it and things started to climb back up. But even after that, from summer all the way through 2020, we remained below average. This outlier right here, if you can see where I'm circling, and it was Labor Day. And those of you that get to work during hurricanes and winter storms know that in 2019, we had a hurricane that I think touched right at the state lines. Right around, I think, Labor Day. So that was why that was a dip because of in volumes. But as you can see, we're tracking right almost back to normal in South Carolina at 1% below what it was in 2019 for volumes. So what do we manage at DOT, South Carolina DOT? We've got 851 interstate miles in our state to the center line, and we've got 850 TMC monitored miles. When I say manage it, it's kind of like Jerron. I always like Jerron. I like to show how we do it. This slide's probably a little bit dated, but we've probably got around 500 miles of optic fiber now across the state, and probably around 80 DMS and 90 portable message boards, if I had to guess. But I've probably just jinxed us, and one of them's probably already been hit by somebody on one of our interstate routes. And we've got 500 cameras approximately and 5 TMCs. What that allows us to do, obviously, is we pull real-time data into our TMCs as well as our traffic engineers through our Iteris Here contract. It also feeds 511. We have an ATMS that helps our TMCs efficiently, effectively message. And then obviously I already talked about the automatic traffic recorders that showed how we were the last couple of years with COVID. And finally, we have portable cameras that don't look like that. They look more like what Jerron showed, but we have the ability to move those around to deploy them as necessary to help our management really watch things as needed, whether it be emergency bridge demolition or whether it be hurricane evacuations at some key traffic control point. So we're pretty liberal in moving them around when we need to with our staff. We have 4 pieces of intelligence really coming into our TMCs to help us make informed decisions, right? We've got the real-time data I talked about. We've got the cameras. Our TMCs also monitor highway patrol dispatch. And then we have the public, which is always so apt to let us know what they think about the job we're doing, or our lane closures related to freeway widenings or anything of that nature. And I think, as I showed previously, we've got 5 TMCs. But only one, the state TMC in Columbia, is the only one that's 24/7, 7 days a week. The other ones are really just daytime, like 7A to 7P. we don't have IMAP. We've got SHEP down here, but it's very similar. Been around since '96. They report to those 5 TMCs, and they oversee 350 miles of freeways and then some primary routes in the Myrtle Beach area. And they respond to, on average, about 35,000 calls for service statewide a year. And that's really a map showing the infrastructure of the SHEP service routes. As you can imagine, that it really aligns with our metro areas. One could argue Florence, but I-95 gets a lot of traffic in that area. So that's where they provide service. Here's another look of how we use ITS. And this is kind of what Jerron said. This is the kind of stuff that upper management loves to see before they go speak to the governor or the director of VMD. You know, how are we doing? And this kind of shows that Labor Day evacuation where we had this big spike in the volumes. And we were not going to do the lane reversal. We weren't going to start at Interstate 26 until around 12. But once we saw this spike real early, it gave us that intelligence to say we need to pull the trigger early if we've got the people in place, the highway patrol and our maintenance workers. So I always like to show real time. This is the kind of stuff that helps us make those decisions, you know, on the fly, but with the data. And here's another piece. This is from real-time data with Iteris and here. This was re-entry. You know, a lot of folks think after the hurricane, everything's done. You know, there's no more work to be done. But re-entry is another key indicator that we have to watch on the ITS side, right? And that just kind of showed that coming from Columbia back to Charleston, it peaked out around 1 o'clock, but it started to come down after that to get back to a normal travel time. So another piece of information that our management loves to be able to see to kind of predict and project. So where are we going in the future in South Carolina? Obviously, we're a lot like Jerron as far as in North Carolina DOT as far as the color DMS. We've placed a few of the first color DMS around a year ago. And they're really going to help us, I think, with interstate evacuations with the lane reversals, because it's going to really, I think, show or help educate the drivers of what to expect when they get some of these key interchanges and interchange to interchange situations. We're continuing to move our ITS infrastructure north up 95 because that's just a gap in what we've got coverage for. We've been in the process of trying to procure a stop vehicle detection software to enhance our abilities because, you know, with 500 cameras, any of y'all that work in this business, you know, your TMC operator can't stare at 500 cameras all day. You pick the 30 hot spots or 40 and you project those up on that wall, but then there's 460 that you're not looking at. So hopefully this intelligence will help point us to a camera when there's a stopped vehicle or wrong way driver and increase our response time and hopefully decrease the fatalities, which was one of my earlier slides. So my hope is that's in place, you know, in the next few months. You know, procurement, well, my challenge is I should have put procurement down as one of the challenges. We're upgrading our state TMC. Again, it's the only one that's 24/7 and it hasn't received any real upgrades in a long time. So that design work's going to start up this next year. And then we're looking at emerging technologies with WorkZone and Tismo. I think we just had a good discussion with our AGC a couple of days ago, and we're going to add the radar speed feedback trailers in our work zones where they make sense. How that would integrate with our TMCs, I don't know, but we're always trying to get better and do more things. And that's where a lot of stuff bleeds over. I don't know how North Carolina DOT is structured, but we've got a signal design section. We have our state TMC section. You know, we've got a work zone section, and we have a kind of just beginning a Tismo program in the past year. So we're kind of on the walk section of that or phase. But all those interconnect, right? And then you've got another, but they're all in traffic engineering. So that's the good things. We're all in the same family, but they also all touch IT. So that's a challenge. So I'm almost finished trying to catch up, but obviously money's an issue, right? You can't do it all at one time. You got to incrementally add your infrastructure. So with that, that's a challenge to add that infrastructure on the routes you don't have. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes money. I think we've got around $9 million a year that we dedicate just to ITS infrastructure. And then the other was the now. You know, we'll have a situation where there's a winter storm and it hits an area with no camera coverage, and then they're like, we need cameras there. We need it, and we need them yesterday, you know? So you kind of got to say, oh, I could get probably 20 miles put in next year. You know, let's put this in something we can all accept and manage expectations. Like Jerron said, obviously utilities can be a challenge, especially when they cut your fiber or one of your own contractors cuts your fiber and you lose camera coverage. And it could be when something really important is going on that your staff or senior staff want to see. Policies. That's another challenge. We don't record our feeds in South Carolina. I assume North Carolina doesn't as well, because you'd have to have full-time staff to give camera recordings to all the attorneys that they're doing lawsuits for crashes. So, you know, for that reason, we don't record our camera feeds. And, you know, there's also have policies of what messages we will run. I'm sure all these agencies get requests from citizens that want messages like turn your lights on when it rains, or things of that nature. And we really try and focus our messaging, our message boards to some type of safety campaign, either SCDOT's doing, or we're running for SCDPS. So we try to make sure we're not messaging the best way to get tickets for the fair and the state fair in Columbia, because that's really not what these things are for, right? And then finally, construction is a challenge, because we work well at the DOT about putting the infrastructure back in. But obviously, when your interstate is torn up for 10, 20 miles, your fiber's gone, you've got to put in that temporary communication, and you've lost a lot of your camera coverage. So that's a balancing act with adding new infrastructure and then replacing the infrastructure that gets damaged by your own project, right? I think it's a huge challenge, but they do a great job. And that's probably all of it that I had. I did want to say that our ITS and TMC staff, just like probably North Carolina and the other municipalities, they do a great job of keeping all of our stuff operational. We've got on-call contractors too that they deploy on a weekly basis. So they get reports first of the week to say these cameras are having problems, or this DMS is having issues, and that's how they send the contractors to keep these things functioning. Because you're right, it's not a fire and forget. You can't just put all this stuff out there and not maintain it. But that was all I had, and I'll stand by for questions.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Great information. We do have a couple questions that have come in. First one is, how much does South Carolina spend on their ITSIM program statewide?
Yeah, that's a good question. We kind of have two different pots of money. We use about $9 million a year. It's really probably 8.7, 8.6 for ITS infrastructure. And again, that's maintaining it and adding it along our routes. And that's fiber, DMS, cameras predominantly. And then we have another 10 million that we budget for our incident responder program. So that's kind of the two pieces of our budgeting in South Carolina.
Okay, great. And then there's another question. This is for the panel. And I'll tell you what, I'll hold this one to the end to our overall discussion. But one question I did have specific to South Carolina DOT, Rob, is, I've seen a lot of presentations and know that the flooding challenges that you guys had due to the hurricane that occurred that you referenced in late 2019. Any lessons learned from an ITS perspective as far as utilization, deployment, need for additional devices, need for additional resources, things of that nature?
We really had to move some of our temporary cameras down there, because I think we really worked well with Meredith and Jennifer and Kevin Lacey, because I think, the water hit y'all, and then we just had to wait for it to come down on us, which was not pleasant, but at least it gave us time to react. But it also gave our staff time to put the temporary cameras in places where we knew that things would be underwater. And it allowed us to be able to share those routes that we were going to, I think it was Project Lifeline, and through Conway, that we were able to share with North Carolina, so you could route your supplies up north to get it there. But other than that, I don't see us adding a bunch of cameras in the Myrtle Beach area, because it seems like these events, one year it's a snowstorm on I-95 at the Georgia line. The next year it's flooding coming from North Carolina to the Myrtle Beach area. So I think that the key is to have those portable devices is to me the key, because you can't have the the hard devices everywhere. You just can't.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. Excellent presentation. Next, we're going to the City of Raleigh with Jed Niffenegger. Jed?
Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah,
All
we
right,
can,
well,
Jed.
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to start off by saying, Ashley, sorry if I steal some of your thunder. I'm going to approach this strictly from a local government standpoint. The way we're set up in North Carolina, Meredith might touch on this. I don't know off the top of my head, I heard it the other day. The state has a significant amount of signal systems, the largest ones being the municipalities, for example, Charlotte and Raleigh in this case, where the local jurisdiction maintains it. So I'm going to talk about some of the barriers that Raleigh's had from ITS standpoint. The typical barriers, I'm not going to spend too much time on that because everyone has those, and then really kind of hammer down and do some case studies that we had. Again, the limited funding, everyone runs into that. I guess from the local standpoint, most of the ITS projects that we go after, they're grant type setups. The big one that we had was a CMAQ grant. So we have to come up with the matching funds, and actually we have to come up with all the funds we pay up front and then get reimbursed in the rear. And in a city, we have competing interests such as parks, new parks, greenways, police and fire stations, which this picture here, a nice road is a lot more appealing for a politician to do a ribbon cutting at than a shiny, sexy to me signal cabinet over there to the left that can actually move traffic and have a pretty high return on investment. And the last item is Jerron kind of hit on that. And engineers are notorious for not being the greatest communicators and poor storytelling. Even if we did a better job, I don't know if it would move the needle significantly, but I think that's one area that we collectively don't put our best foot forward on. A lot of these projects, ITS projects, can have a huge ROI in a very quick time period. Now getting in kind of to the local standpoint, we managed one extremely large ITS project, and we're in the process of doing a portion of a new one. The first one was the Raleigh signal system upgrade. That was done in partnership with Meredith and NCDOT. It was a CMAQ grant. We upgraded about 620 cabinets and added 210 miles of fiber optic network connecting all of our signals and terminating them into our traffic management center. Currently, we got a grant from our transit department. We're going to do a TSP pilot, which just so happens to almost align perfectly with the first leg of one of our BRT corridors. Raleigh, if y'all been keeping up with the news, did a countywide tax referendum. As opposed to going with light rail or something else, we went with bus rapid transit. As part of that, we're going to be running transit signal priority with that. One of the barriers we've run into is we'd like to go with a total systems approach, which means the cabinets and buses wouldn't have equipment on them that speak to each other. We would be relying on the AVL systems on the bus to provide, real-time locations to our traffic management center and be able to make adjustments to the timing and signal cycling. so that they would be able to get a green or hold a green. One other thing, barrier that has kind of been a barrier and a blessing is we have managed our own projects. The downsides of that is we're trained as, traffic engineers and how to operate signals, not necessarily how to manage complex projects, which I'll get to a little bit later. In addition to that, it diverted resources. When we went through our first one, we had to take our traffic control manager and traffic center manager and pretty much make him the full-time PM during that signal system upgrade. One of the benefits, though, is by involving our staff early on during construction, they got more familiar with the equipment, how it operated, so that the learning curve later on wasn't quite as steep. One of the barriers, and this probably extends to the state as well, but from a local standpoint, the number of entities involved is large. Obviously, we worked with our local MPO to get the grant, and the state. Our city IT found out about our project and wanted to piggyback and get some fiber installed, which added complexities. FHWA, obviously, we have to dot our I's and cross our T's to make sure that everything we do managing the project is done in a way where we will be eligible for reimbursement. And then at a local level, we have our city council to answer to as well. So tracking all those entities and the boxes we have to check with each of them was quite an endeavor. The other one of the barriers was the way it was set up. We broke our signal system into 4 separate projects, and if ever anyone's thinking of doing another one, I would strongly recommend not doing that. We got extremely lucky in that the contractor for the first stage ended up winning the subsequent 3 stages. So we just had one contractor, but it could have been a nightmare if we had gotten different contractors, because things inevitably go wrong, and then the finger pointing just becomes that much more complicated. In addition to the general contractor, we had an integrator. We were using Siemens. So the integrator their role was to make sure that the software worked with all the hardware, which the contractor was installing. And we ran into a few issues there in finger pointing, which I'll get to here. Fish out of water. I heard one of the, remember it was David Spencer, someone else the other day was talking about how traffic engineers are becoming more and more adept at the IT world, network management, and we had a hard lesson in that. During construction, apparently one of the vendors of equipment that we had procured, their rapid spanning tree wasn't the same protocol as some of the other switches. So we have what was called an ARPS, a packet storm, which again, this was hieroglyphics for me at the time. And what happened about 4 o'clock, the packets built up and made all the cabinets go, or 40 of the cabinets go into conflict flash. This happened at 4 p.m., right? The start of rush hour on one of our busiest corridors. And in a situation like this, we as a government entity, we can't allow something like that to happen. And we had to get involved, but we had to kind of walk that razor's edge of not getting too involved, because it ultimately was a contractor's responsibility. But at the same time, we couldn't let this happen week after week while the contractor sorted it out. So we were thankfully had some internal experts to help us get through that. But again, that was kind of coming from a fish out of water, being more of a traffic background and not necessarily having the expertise in the IT fields. One of the other, in my opinion, biggest barriers is the post-project planning or lack of. Just the way, and this isn't pointing fault at anyone, it's just the way the projects go. When you go after, come up with an idea for a project, you go after funding, it's for the project, not for ongoing operations and maintenance. And Ashley might be able to talk a little bit more about this, but one of the areas that we ran into is we were staffed for a certain amount of signals with a twisted copper backbone for communication, and went to 210 miles of fiber optic. We had to make decisions. Well, do we contract repair work out? Do we have it internal? So we had to really get our head around that. The other component is typically for projects like this, you can't procure any extra equipment. The equipment you get is just for the project. So we are no different than any other government entity. It takes a while for us to budget and get things in the queue. So some of the switches have a lifespan of 8 to 10 years and are costly. Others last a little bit longer, but we had to kind of plan on the fly to maintain inventory for the new equipment that we got, from the controllers to the switches. And that was kind of a hard thing to do mid-project in a governmental budget. Kind of talked about it earlier about maintaining the new equipment, the fiber. We ended up getting 2 internal FTEs in addition to having contractual help if things break. Another thing is just the Rumsfeld quote of knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, or whatever it was. I never had any kind of idea that squirrels love to chew on fiber optic cable, but apparently they do. And someone, I guess, that speaks to squirrel languages told me that it tastes like peanut butter to them. So we've lost a lot of fiber optic cable to squirrel damage, and that was something that we never saw. So, dealing with that again is, you can plan for a lot, but there's always unplanned things that pop up. And the other one is how to operate new technology. A lot of our staff was more electrical based, and the new equipment was a lot more plug and play and electronical based. And working with our field techs to have that paradigm shift was sometimes a challenge. The training that we got as part of the project was helpful, but again, training in a situation like that is never what you want. So the good news is that a way to overcome the barrier is make sure that if you are going to implement one of these type projects, involve your staff early on with the contractor so that they can get their feet wet early on. That's all I have, and be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jed. Got 3 questions in the chat, but there's more for the entire panel. So I'll park those until we finish up. Yeah, that's interesting about the fiber tasting like peanut butter. So in the city of Oaks, you put down 210 miles of linear miles of peanut butter for the squirrels, huh? That'd be a buffet there. One question I had, or maybe observation, is a couple things before we move on. does Raleigh approach it on a quarter basis or on a trouble spot basis or a hot spot basis as far as the deployment of the ITS? And how do you use, what kind of data do you use to determine which corridor gets the ITS treatment, I guess?
Well, from our network standpoint, what we do with our network is we were fortunate enough to have a redundant fiber backbone built. So we have staff that, again, that kind of fish out of water that we had to train and get more savvy with network, where we will purposely break a network to see if the redundancy works. And we do that on a fairly frequent basis. In addition to that, as things do break, we kind of triage them just due to lack of resources and budget to, you know, if there's a redundant path and it's working, we might leave that certain break go for a little bit longer and address the more critical ones. So it's kind of case by case basis, but we try to be proactive with the network that we have to ensure that when like events like hopefully tomorrow will be benign, but if it's not, that we do have some redundancy and our redundancy works.
How much coordination or integration do you have with NCDOT's efforts and equipment?
Quite a bit, actually. We work a lot behind the scenes with NCDOT. We had a long discussion with NCDOT when we were going to TSP about more regional approach to kind of ITS. A lot of our suburban neighbors are having signal systems built, and we want to start planning so that our software is compatible. And, you know, for regional initiatives like BRT, we can cross boundaries with minimal complexities. So we do quite a bit of discussion with the state behind the scenes to make sure that we're heading in the right direction.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, next we'll pass the baton over to Meredith McDermott with NCDOT. Meredith?
Sorry, it always helps to unmute when you're presenting.
That's all right.
Can you see my screen?
We can, Meredith. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was ready to share my presentation, but forgot that you needed to hear me. First of all, I just want to send regrets from Kevin Lacey. He was originally scheduled to talk to you today. This is his presentation. But unfortunately, he's in court. He would much prefer to be here than there. But you know, you get me. So I'll share with you the information he wanted to share with you. Certainly not in the way Kevin would, but I'll try to do it justice. I am the state TSMO engineer, and so we're going to talk about some barriers to implementation of those TSMO strategies. And of course, the discussion throughout today has been pretty much the obvious: money. There's not enough of it to go around. Interesting discussion about question about the dollars per mile that we spend on these types of strategies. We have been trying to be creative in different pots of money that we use, and will continue to be. It was just trying to get as many resources as we can to try to help us put those together. We do have some ideas how to tap into federal funding more, and we're trying to work through that process to see if we can take advantage of those funds. But money is always an issue. We do a great job with what we have. So we'll just do the best we can. Historically, as John mentioned earlier, most TSMO projects were part of a roadway construction project. We still use that method. We still try to get devices inserted into TIP projects, especially the bigger ones, whenever we can. Not only devices, but operational strategies like integrated corridor management, for example. Lots of times though, when we have devices like cameras or DMSs or fiber put into a project, they're kind of the redheaded stepchild of construction in terms of, you know, they usually have a specialty contractor putting them in, and it's probably the last things they're thinking about. In the times when we tried to get them put in on the front end, then we have trouble with getting that fiber cut when the construction is underway. So we've also been challenged with, you know, when funds get low on a construction project and they're looking for things to cut out, ITS often is part of that. So there's challenges that we have had and continue to have in some ways. You know, those standalone projects are fewer and further between. He's right. TSMO projects are more of a thing of convenience versus a well thought out plan. It's, oh yeah, and then we can, ... So we're trying to get more consideration in the beginning stages, the scoping stages of our project, so that we can be more part of the solution. The question is, can TSMO projects compete? And I know someone in the chat box talked about return on investment. And they certainly can, but I'll talk a little bit more about benefit cost in a minute. But these projects do have the ability to compete. Are they allowed to, is the question in North Carolina for funding on their own, especially in our STI process, our TIP process. So, you know, we're competing against not just the typical widening project or the bypass project, but other modes like pedestrians and bicyclists or rail. It's a race to the finish line. And we're trying to put TSMO more in the forefront of that. Not to say that widening is not important or other modes are not important at all. It's just trying to get a seat at the table and see if we can push some of these strategies forward. But, you know, the odds are against us. We are still a new project, new road state. We're not at the point of some of the other more populated states or cities, for that matter, who don't have room to expand. We are still building new roads and we're still widening existing roads. And so, you know, we do have some headwinds and inertia against us. It's still new and different in terms of, you know, institutionalizing the concept of TSMO. Asphalt and concrete, I think somebody mentioned before, are sexy and you can cut a ribbon for them. ITS and other TSMO solutions, not so much. So we're kind of trying to crack into that institutional and say, where's our seat at the table? It's just not something people typically think about yet in North Carolina and probably South Carolina too. Phil Turnoff, those that have been to the Operations Academy have been taught a class or two by him, and he wrote a book back in 2001. And the big question is, why are we driving 21st century cars on 20th century roads with 19th century thinking? And a lot of times, you know, that's how we feel in the TSMO world. Is, you know, we're back in the 19th century and we should be in the 21st one. So it's an uphill battle. Don't want to sound all negative. There are a lot of positive things going on in North Carolina. But this is kind of Kevin's pet peeve, and he says some of the saddest tables ever in this book, back to return on investment and benefit cost. You know, a large percentage of these strategies did not have any benefit cost ratios or return on investment information. Studies have shown is the big term, or no data available. And, you know, we have to do a better job in our industry to show those return on investments, to establish those benefit costs. And that's on us. We need to be able to do that. Lots of times it's before and after studies for things like a towing contract for Business 40 closure, or for IMAP on 95 where we didn't have it before, taking every opportunity to try to show the benefit of these types of strategies. And we have been trying to do that in North Carolina. We do know, just as a general rule, some of these types of TSMO strategies do have high benefit costs. And these are published, if you will. Lots of times it varies. You know, service patrols, as an example, there's a pretty large range of benefit costs from different studies across the country on that, but we do know it has one. And what is that, and how can we show that? A lot of it is preventative work. When you talk about service patrol, for instance, a lot of, even in traveler information with the DMS, we're trying to prevent things from happening. So it's hard to say what would have happened if we didn't have that. But again, that doesn't mean we're not going to try. The traffic signals, much more institutionalized in our TSMO world, if you will. Signal systems, an established thing, and we're trying to push those too. So, you know, we just got our work cut out for us. It keeps things interesting. We have had success in spite of the challenges that I mentioned. Our partnerships are getting stronger. We are trying to add some traffic management centers. We are, you know, still continuing to add infrastructure on our roadways, investing in fiber. We have an infra project for broadband, for instance, on I-95 and surrounding areas. We put a lot of effort into signal timing and retiming, signal system retiming, that is. We do have ramp meters in place, and more on the horizon. Active traffic management is the key, the key term that we're trying to use. Sometimes we get mixed up when we say operations, because that's a word in North Carolina that a lot of people associate with what I would call maintenance operations. So, you know, we're trying to say this is not maintenance. This is, you know, active traffic management, and use those terms to distinguish the difference in discussions. We developed a thorough training process for our IMAP program, or our service patrol, much like the SHEP in South Carolina. We put them through a rigorous 4-week training before we let them get out there and be assessed and be able to perform on their own, just to try to reduce the risk for them and for the motorists when they're out there working by themselves. We have really advanced our, especially contract towing processes, and we want to work with the towers to do additional training. Traffic management during major storms, we have also done, we did a good job before, don't get me wrong, but we've really, especially with Florence, we learned a lot of new things and came up with a lot of different strategies and advanced our response to those storms. And that's been noticed. I think that we're getting some good face time with that. Integrated corridor management will be a reality. It is a reality in North Carolina. And there are many more that we can mention. So we have vision, we have plans. You know, again, back to the first slide, just need some money to be able to do it. So what's the so what? What are the lessons that we want to get across, and how do we make these visions a reality? And, you know, Jerron alluded to this earlier, but you need to be prepared when an opportunity arises. For example, we had abandoned vehicles that were hampering the operations of our snowplows. We jumped in and in cooperation with the Highway Patrol. Now, about 3 days before a storm, we will go out there and tow those vehicles so they do not get in the way of snowplows. And we've been fortunate enough to expand this on a day-to-day basis when we need to, and the Highway Patrol's been very cooperative with that. And so we jumped in and said, hey, we can help with that. As I mentioned, our STI process, or for those of you who don't know that term in North Carolina, basically our prioritization and scoring process for capital improvement projects mainly. We are trying to challenge that limitation for capital projects only. And we do have some significant buy-in. We got to get all the buy-in we need to be able to break through that barrier. Again, developing measures of effectiveness and demonstrating effectiveness. We got to do a better job at that. That's the bottom line. But we did take the opportunity when we had to close I-40 business in Winston-Salem. We set up an enhanced incident management process with local agencies and had a dedicated tower to make sure that we kept that I-40 bypass moving. Developed a dashboard, track performance. This is very helpful when we started to do that in other areas. And we have even more lessons learned with our I-26 contract towing and starting to learn that on I-95. So these before and after evaluations that I mentioned are going to be able to show the difference that it makes. When something goes wrong, you got to be prepared. And so as an example, we had a vehicle that was towed and the owner sued the department. It shouldn't have been towed. You know, what does our legislation allow? Who in the organization is the problem when it becomes a public issue? So we have to manage all those foreseen risk at all stages. You got to be prepared. You got to remove barriers when they're in front of you, and it may be immediate and it may take time. For instance, this has been quite some time ago, but our statutes did not allow us to initiate quick clearance. The interpretation that was only law force that could initiate it. We still have to have concurrence, but we had to reword the law so that DOT could take that first step to work with law enforcement to get concurrence. And we asked the legislature to revise that law, and they approved that change. You also need to build upon past successes. So IMAP, for instance, what's the value of IMAP? We had a really hard time really pinpointing that. And I mentioned their role in major weather events has nearly eliminated the question of their value. So, you know, you just got to take your wins when you get them, and you got to pick the right fights. So if you're trying to, in North Carolina at least right now, to argue the value of TSMO against a maintenance project or some type of other operational project, in their words, when they are also underfunded, you're not going to win that fight. So even if our TSMO strategies are underfunded by a larger percentage, so we have to find strategies that have benefits in both worlds. For instance, and this is construction, not maintenance, but on I-26, some of our TSMO strategies allowed the construction operations to close, like our incident corridor management, integrated corridor management allowed us to close the road and find other opportunities for folks to go in other ways. And therefore we didn't have to close the road, you know, over several weekends or several days in the future. We went ahead and handled it, saved the contractor money, saved us money, saved the motorists some pain and angst. So, you know, you just got to find those opportunities where it's a win-win for everybody. And I don't know who Kevin was talking about when he's talking about being stubborn and hard-headed, because that's not me. I'm just kidding. I think all traffic engineers can attest to being stubborn and hard-headed, because we're in an area where we're fighting that uphill battle. So we need to make sure that, that we fight for what we believe is a good investment and continue to bear down and move onward, push forward. That's all I have, Mike.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, you always hear that everybody with a license thinks they're a traffic engineer. So it's a tough role, that's for sure. Just one quick question, Meredith, is could you talk a few minutes about the importance of the integration or cooperation with adjacent states in making your ITS systems successful, especially during storm events?
Yeah. So as Rob mentioned earlier, especially during hurricanes, we're working really well together. Jennifer Portanova, most of you know her. She's constantly texting Rob and saying, what are y'all planning? What can we expect? We don't have a lot of volume counters, if you will, at least not real time in North Carolina. We have to depend on speeds. That's what we have, our data that we have. And so Rob will say, this is what we're thinking, this is when we're going to reverse our roads and we're going to send this traffic up this way. And so then we know I-26 in the mountains is going to get an influx of folks coming out of South Carolina, tomorrow afternoon, or I-95, wherever this storm might be hitting and where their reversal goes. As an example, with devices, I know we have DMSs in other states, our neighboring states that we manage and maintain and use, and the other states do also, just to tell folks as they're entering another state what's going on, and we do work with that. I know during storms and even special events, we have coordinated with other states to use IMAP to go down and help South Carolina on the I-26, for example. And we really do need to formalize some of those agreements but so far it's been a handshake, and we're able to, say, hey, is it okay if we go down and help you, and make sure that we're all covered and we get proper approvals. But we try to do that a lot. Work with Tennessee on I-40. Hey, can you put this message up? We got a rock slide in Tennessee, and vice versa. So I think we do a pretty good job. It could probably be better formalized, but we have good contacts in all the states and know how to directly contact them, and we do pretty well.
Good, great, excellent. Thank you. Thanks. Next, we'll go to, last but not least, City of Charlotte, Ashley Bonnice. Ashley?
There. All right, let me get this screen shared. Is that working, or is it showing my presentation as well?
Looks good, Ashley.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm excited to be here talking about the City of Charlotte DOT's ITS program. Like some of the other folks said, the ITS components sometimes seem to be on the back burner. So I enjoy this chance to get to talk about kind of what we do, and even if it is kind of talking about barriers and the struggles that we go through. Here's just a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. Just kind of Charlotte's growth, what some of our goals are for the program, our ITS master plan, funding limitations that, of course, we've heard several times, increase in development, which really plays a role in how our program works now, some of the staffing and project coordination we do. We have a lot of unexpected challenges, construction and otherwise, and then I'll talk a little bit about the maintenance of our existing infrastructure. Now just a few things about Charlotte itself. So Charlotte's the 15th largest US city. It's up from number 17 in 2019. It's the largest North Carolina city, and it's the second fastest growth rate in the US. We're adding about 44 people a day is what the stats are saying, which is pretty significant. Right now our population's right over 900,000. We maintain 2,500 miles of streets, city maintained, and then the state also has about 600 miles that they maintain within the city of Charlotte. And then one quick fact about Charlotte. So the Charlotte got its name from when the European settlers came to the area. King George III's wife was named Queen Charlotte, so that's how Charlotte got its name. And a lot of times you'll hear Charlotte called the Queen City, and that's where that name comes from. Or that nickname, I guess you could say, comes from. I always find that interesting. All right, now our transportation action plan was adopted in 2006. It's a comprehensive look at our transportation goals throughout the city. It's divided into 6 chapters, and then in one part specifically focuses on ITS. There's 2 TAP goals that we use. So the city will look to maximize the capacity of existing streets using technology. And then we're also looking to have all of our traffic signals on a coordinated system by 2030, which is coming up quickly. So we also have an ITS master plan, which was originally developed in 2004. We revised it in 2008, and then now we're also looking to hopefully have another revision to that document this year. So this provides a comprehensive strategy for CDOT to implement our ITS goals. We started conversations with folks in 2018, 2019 for a regional ITS master plan. But I think with the effects of COVID, that kind of dropped off the radar temporarily, but hopefully that'll be back up here in the next several months. Anyway, all right, now on to some fun stats about Charlotte. So CDOT maintains 825 traffic signals, over 470 traffic cameras, and 70% of our fiber infrastructure is built out. We currently have 340 miles of fiber. This says 330, but I checked it just today, and we've actually added 10 more miles. So we have about 140 miles of proposed fiber. In 2001, we deployed our first ITS project, meaning we installed fiber cable, traffic cameras, and Ethernet communications equipment. And we are about 70% built out of that. We build probably about 10 to 15 miles a year, depending on the priorities and kind of what we have going on. We, like I said, maintain all of our own infrastructure, which is growing exponentially. Just a few other projects that I just wanted to touch on and kind of highlight. A couple years ago, we did an emergency vehicle preemption project along with bus priority preemption. We did leading pedestrian intervals, which started in the CBD and has since expanded in other areas of the city. We upgraded our VMS system last year, just right before the RNC was held here in Charlotte. And then we continue to upgrade several of our analog to digital cameras. Okay. Now on to funding. I know you heard this on everybody's slide, right? Lack of funding. So City of Charlotte funds our projects in a number of different ways. One of them is through transportation bonds. So we are dedicated $3 million every 2 years for transportation bonds just to interconnect our traffic signals and expand on the technology. The only year we didn't get it was 2012, and that was kind of when the economy was not doing so well. We didn't get the bonds that year. On NCDOT and state roads, sometimes we'll get state funds and grant funds. Those are usually a little harder to get, and they require a lot more coordination, documentation, things like that. So they actually usually take a good bit longer to achieve, several months, sometimes even longer to get those funds in hand. And I think, like maybe Jed said, we actually usually front that money up front and then get reimbursed for it. And it's usually a partial reimbursement, so it's not 100%. Sometimes we'll have conduit or fiber put in through other larger roadway projects. But like Meredith said, that's usually the first thing to go when the budgets start to have issues. the ITS usually isn't like a forefront popular thing. So it's usually the first thing that gets cut from the project and then gets put back on us at a later date. And then lastly, we do get funds from private developers who install new signals. And then we require them to interconnect our traffic signals with fiber, install traffic management cameras. These are often designed and implemented by others, but CDOT still needs to take the time to approve and review all of those locations. All right, and just a couple more slides on our funding. So the city continues to grow quickly, but limited additional funds are made available for staffing, infrastructure, and maintenance. Our maintenance needs have grown significantly over the last few years. Part of that is we must maintain our fiber routes for the emergency preemption. We have a lot of fiber damages lately. We have outages, and we must react pretty quickly to get those issues resolved. As Charlotte continues to grow, we put in 10 new traffic signals last year, 8 new head hybrid beacons, and then 1 emergency signal. And then some more discussion on the increased development. Part of the increase in traffic signals is from the increase in private development. It seems like even with the COVID, the number of the amount of development has just skyrocketed lately. So all of our traffic signals must be on a coordinated system. So when we get a request for a new traffic signal, sometimes we have to prioritize that ITS project ahead of others because the signal can't be installed without being on a coordinated system. Some of our areas have old copper, but it's not really reliable anymore. And so you can't install any new equipment on existing copper systems. To look to the future, so it's anticipated that the number of people working in Mecklenburg County, which is the county surrounding Charlotte, is going to increase to about 1.2 million people in 2040. That means additional traffic and additional traffic signals. The population in Mecklenburg County is already over 1 million and growing. So this increase in traffic signals means additional staff time reviewing and documentation to get all those put through. In closing on the funding discussion, our TAP recommends a funding level of about $92 million over the next 25 years to implement ITS. So that funding is going to be categorized strictly for ITS. So we have a lot of work to do still. Now our staffing limitations. So back when the ITS programs first started out, it was mostly the ITS folks were doing design and management of these projects. Well, now with the increase in our infrastructure, there's repair and maintenance as well. But guess what? It's pretty much the same staff doing both of those things now. So the funding is not really increasing for staffing, but we're on the rise with the amount of work that we're needing. And since these maintenance and repairs have substantially increased, we have also started contracting out some of this. So we have an on-call contract for repairs and relocations, which, again, takes away from some of the funding that we have slated for other items. Mm-hmm. And then another barrier that we see sometimes is just the coordination that is required to get some of these ITS projects implemented. There's all kinds of different staffing requirements and people that need to be involved in getting these projects done. The CDOT ITS group, the electronics lab, who actually does the traffic controller work, and our city INT coordinate probably almost on a daily basis. Any new signal locations, the INT will program our switch cards for us. And then the lab will install those into the field. There's a lot of troubleshooting happening when we have fiber damages or even just inputting new coordinated systems. There's a lot of back and forth between these departments and sections. All of our ITS assets are now in GIS. So we have all of our fiber utilization, all of our traffic cameras. And so we're coordinating pretty routinely with our CDOT GIS team to make sure that all those databases are updated and that our records are all accurate. We have internal and external design construction teams. So we have consultants on call who help us with planning, design, coordination, and construction admin. So we're constantly on calls and meetings with making sure those are coordinated. Our bidding process is actually something that takes a while and takes a lot of coordination. All construction projects must have the low bid process according to the NC general statute. So we have to actually advertise and bid those. We have to go through general services, which is our engineering department, procurement, our Charlotte Business Inclusion Office, all of these. Then vendors must be vetted by the city. Also, if the contracts are over 500,000, then we have to take those to city council to get approval before we can procure that contract and execute it. We have a lot of unexpected challenges come up a lot during actually construction. There's a lot of concurrent construction activities going on. Like there's been an influx of telecom companies in Charlotte, where AT&T and Google and MCI, all these others are coming in and building out their networks, which puts us in jeopardy of being hit. We have to go out and locate all of our 340 miles of fiber that are underground. So we get probably 5,000 locate tickets a month, which puts a pretty heavy burden on CDOT staff to go out and make sure that those facilities are located and not damaged. And sometimes they still do get damaged, even if they are located, which takes a lot of staff time and a lot of funding. This picture, one of the pictures is actually 10th Street and Graham Street, which was taken just the other day, of how many utilities are actually out in the ground here in Charlotte. Another challenge we have is hitting rock while boring in conduit. You never really know when that's going to happen. A lot of times we don't survey our projects, so we'll have to do field changes when we get out there. And this was just an instance of where they were boring in conduit and hit rock. So that can sometimes add funding and time to a project. This camera pole was put in on Wilkinson Boulevard. We're not sure if it was hit or just the ground kind of underneath loosened, but the project wasn't even closed out yet, and we had to go out and fix this camera pole, put it back up before we finalized the project. This one, another occurrence of a damage. This is Park Road and Woodlawn here in Charlotte, where the fiber cable was actually burned, and it was damaged for almost a mile away. I guess it was from the electricity of the fire. So luckily this repair cost was actually covered, but a lot of times they're not. So we're spending a lot of our budget on making repairs instead of new construction. Let's see. I think Jed talked about this a little bit also with our some of our existing infrastructure and equipment being discontinued. Most of our Ethernet switch models are nearing end of life. So probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have to replace all of those. Our network core switch is also nearing end of life, and those are not cheap. So that's also going to put a pretty big hit on our budget. A lot of our equipment was, installed in the early 2000s. And so we're continually changing out the analog cameras, but, we can't do them all at once. The police use our cameras as well. And so we get requests a lot from them for, when's this one going to be upgraded, or can you change the view, or, and that cost us some time and money as well. And our traffic cameras models seem to change every several months. So we're needing to take time to make sure that those specs and records are up to date. And lastly, just to touch on some of our maintenance work. So this first picture was prior to us doing our TMC upgrade. So it's actually our old TMC, but it's where all of our fiber comes in. So we did a project last year where we did redundant splicing and upgrade. And so we cleaned up these racks, consolidated them and changed all the jumpers. So we have a before and after. And I just like to kind of show this off because I think it's amazing that the amount of space that we added and that this project did. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Excellent presentation. Just one question specific to Charlotte before we go to the panel questions. You know, the recent opening of the hot lanes in the I-77 corridor was, of course, I know there's a lot of DOT assets out there relative to ITS deployment, but does Charlotte have anything out there, and is y'all's infrastructure complete and distinct from what NCDOT has, or do y'all share resources there?
We are pretty separate. We share some camera feeds, but I think that's really all. Since the hot lanes are state maintained and state highway system, that wouldn't be our infrastructure.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, we've got some questions in the chat box that I'll pose to all the panel members. The first one is, there much focus in your agency on quantifying the return on investment for ITS, and we're quantifying the return on investment for ITS investments, excuse me. I think a lot of y'all have alluded to that or stated that as part of your presentation, but any additional comments on the ROI for ITS investments?
I can take a stab at this.
Sure.
When we were done with our signal system upgrade project, the last component was Meredith kind of hit on it, signal optimization. They took our existing plans and tweaked them slightly, and then corridors that we didn't have, private engineering firms added signal plans. So I wrote a kind of an executive summary to our city council, quantifying the monetary value from fuel and time saved in delay reductions, and it was a significant amount, and it was received like crickets. I didn't hear any response. So I went through that exercise and didn't get anything out of it. I don't know if others have experienced something. Or
Rob, anything from South Carolina's perspective?
Yeah, we don't really do that. We obviously, anybody in the traffic safety arena know that for our HSIP projects, we do those BCs, we do the look backs, but no, we don't really have a whole lot of pushback in South Carolina about adding the ITS infrastructure into big projects. And I don't want y'all to talk to any of our other coworkers because I don't want that's to start, but usually the way we justify it is to say, hey, this is a $200 million interstate widening job, or interstate to interchange. So $5 million for ITS is not going to be what moves the needle. You know, it's just not. And usually that kind of gets them over the hump. But we are having challenges. You know, we have local governments that manage our signals, and I noticed that Ashley and Jed, they were talking ITS and they were talking signals, and all, you know, all the stuff I was talking about was really just our interstate, and we use like 501, we have fiber, because through our signal maintenance agreements, we pay some local governments to maintain the signals, and it's getting to be more of a challenge there for them to maintain it, because we don't really give them 100% back what it's costing them, but they have the ability to put non-standard things in, like the preemption that I think Ashley was talking about, which I think is great. And they have the ability to affect signal timings within their municipal limits, which they really want to have that control, right? So, but no, we don't do any type of benefit to cost, no.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I like the, never heard that, but the comment Jennifer Portnova just put in about budget dust. How appropriate.
Yeah, in addition to what I had talked about already on this subject, we did a before and after for our ramp meter project. We don't get a lot of pushback on the infrastructure, the new stuff either, Rob. It's more of, even though ramp meters obviously was new, We have to have this data to be able to compete with other projects in STI. So the new things, especially signal systems, ramp meters, things like that, not so much. But if you're trying to justify a TMC or a safety service patrol or a towing program with incentives, those kinds of things, don't really know how to score that, if you will. So we did a before and after for our ramp meter project. We've done a before and after, like I mentioned, on our towing contract for Business 40. We have research projects with some benefit cost ROI task in there for integrated corridor management. And we can definitely see what has happened when we have not put efforts into maintaining our devices, and that comes out in uptime or lack thereof in this case. So we're trying to put some numbers to those efforts to be able to, support our cause.
Ashley, any final comments on this question? Okay. All right, next question is, have any agencies been required to track and message available truck parking or other things of this nature in 511 or through other means? Tracking truck parking or notifying trucks of available parking?
Yeah, can I expand on that, Mike? I just want to
Yes,
know, I think it's okay for us to say this rest area has 50 truck spaces, but I don't think we have the capability, from my perspective, to say of those 50 at this time, 10 are open. It's just the manpower is too immense. And we've also seen requests for messaging for COVID vaccinations, which is a great idea, but then you don't want to get to where, you're putting on 511 or on message boards that come get vaccinations at the Charlotte hospital, and then somebody drives all the way from out of town and they get there and they're out, then everybody looks bad. Same thing with beach parking. The city of Isle of Palms asked us recently if we could start messaging that, and we said that who's going to do that? How are we not going to have egg on our face? Because that's just not something that we can effectively do and project. So I just didn't know, the idea fairy seems to strike a lot of times.
right.
And it takes those of us that kind of really know what it takes to do something like that to say, I don't think it's a good idea. So I was just curious.
Right. Great. Thanks. Another question we've got is private developments installing signals, closed circuit TV, typically propose install wireless communications due to cost. Fiber is preferred for maintaining agency. How is this quote difference of opinion settled? Fiber is more stable, secure with significant increase in communication speed, maintaining agency workflow efficiency. Question, are there any strategies to establish fiber connectivity a requirement? In other words, I guess all the new installations and some of the retrofits that you're doing are now fiber as opposed to copper?
Yeah, we have a new standard now where we won't install a new signal unless it's on a coordinated system. And we do get requests from the private developers to do the wireless or 4G modems, but we're not quite there yet. Part of that is the ongoing funding for that. Like how do you do an agreement with them to keep funding that year after year when it's a one-time fee for our review of their design and approval. So we're kind of struggling with that. That's a new thing, I think, for CDOT. I guess within the last couple of years, we started doing developer agreements with private developers where they design and install these signals once we approve them. So yeah, we prefer fiber, of course. It's more reliable. It's there. It's long-term. You don't have to upgrade that equipment, as soon as you would with wireless equipment. And another issue with the wireless is security. Like our INT is typically not on board with this wireless equipment. That is something that we're working on now. And a big push for that also is the emergency preemption. Like the fire department, we've been in conversations with them about helping to fund some of that long-term. That's not necessarily with private developments, but just a little history on kind of where we're at with that. It's a learn as you go process. We're continuing, I think, to evolve with our developer agreements. And there's a lot that, or there can be pushback from them, you know, why are you wanting us to install a mile of fiber when the signal's right here? And our, you know, stance is that this needs to be on a coordinated system with the rest of our traffic signals in these communication groups. So it's an ongoing conversation. We're learning as we go.
Right. Okay, thanks. Jed, any wireless versus peanut butter in the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is more a local. I see Dennis from Wilmington post that question. So a lot of the locals, I'm sure Carrie's running the same thing. Right now, we haven't had much pushback requesting fiber. Only one situation where it was going to be a very long run, and it was Wake County Public School System. So we allowed the use of a radio, but for the most part, as of late, we've been requesting that the developers install cameras, CCTVs, and we can do power over Ethernet, which makes it just plug and play and it's very low cost. And the benefit to the developer is a lot of times they're temporary traffic control plans. We can have eyes on the signals in close proximity and minimize the impact they're causing to the surrounding businesses and residents. So kind of that, we haven't had to use the stick so much as the carrot with CCTVs. If they install a CCTV, which then needs to be connected to fiber, we can help them out with the temporary traffic control. And going back to Ashley's point, we really don't want to, I mean, we're pretty much on the line in the sand. We don't want to take on a signal for maintenance that's not connected to our network. So then the state will kind of be the heavy in that regard, because they don't want to maintain one sole signal in all of Raleigh. So we haven't had too much of an issue with that so far, but we have really gotten a kind of leveraged the use of CCTVs out of that, which they're worth their weight in gold ×2.
Right. Okay. Thanks. One other question from the Whova chat. What are the challenges because of the software limitations, let's say ATMS and effective implementation of ITS? Anybody with any response to that?
I'm not sure. North Carolina doesn't have an ATMS per se, although we're still holding out this can happen before I retire. I can't promise, but we're trying. I think it doesn't prevent us from implementing ITS, but it certainly prevents us from, I think, optimizing both the maintenance of and the use of our ITS. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but the procurement, not so easy. ATMS would allow us, I think, what's get measured gets done kind of thing. It would allow us to better utilize our ITS that devices that we do have. We would be able to see it graphically. We would be able to be more effective, do it sooner, make sure we, see mistakes earlier, those kinds of things. So we would be better at it. But it doesn't prevent us from doing it. Okay. I hope I answered that question.
You did. Thank you, Meredith. I'm going to go to staffing for just a minute. We got time for maybe one or two other final questions. Relative to staffing, do you have challenges attracting staff, and are staff that are needed today with the deployment of ITS devices and the very digitized systems that are being installed? Is that a traditional civil engineering need? Is it a data scientist need? Is it an IT background need? Can each of you kind of maybe show a little or demonstrate or enunciate a little vision on that, please? Rob, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think it just depends on what their function is. The ITS arena is just so broad. We're still, like I think I mentioned earlier, we're siloed. We've got a traffic design side that handles our signalized intersections, and then we've got our ITS side, and we have two different ATMS, which, we'd probably be more efficient if we were operating off of one, but that's just how it happens, right? It's kind of like some of the other ITS things that Meredith talked about. As things progress, you add different capabilities and features, but that doesn't mean you can recreate the wheel on the gerbil wheel that you already had. So we haven't had any issues. Our whole signal staff pretty much turned over in the past 24 months. And so our state signal design engineer, she's done a great job of kind of bringing them up, because that's not something you can just walk into a cube and know how to do signal design work and deal with your ATMS. But it's always a struggle, right? As people move on and move out, you've got to kind of take that, kind of like Jerron said, he started in a whole different career field, and now he's probably a subject matter expert in ITS, infrastructure and management.
Jerron, any comments?
I mean, that was, back when I was in the unit, that was, always a challenge, finding those type of expertise when it comes to the ITS arena. What would happen was, a lot of times as an engineer, you'd find yourself having to take classes or take different things to try to learn more about ITS. Because, a lot of times, as engineers, some of us came out of a maintenance background, and a lot of us didn't know a whole lot about ITS. And so, going to conferences and what little stuff you can pick up, it's kind of what you had to do. And you had to rely, and that's kind of where our having the contracts we had kind of really helped us with having, the type of contractors who had that area of expertise to kind of fill in those gaps for us. Now, we had a few, individuals in the unit that have those type of skill set, but it's hard to find that, because it's kind of like you need electrical engineer slash civil engineer slash electronic technique. It was just kind of hard to find that particular expertise. But again, we kind of was able to fill the gap in through using our contracts, and you kind of had the individual who were more specialized in cameras and DMS side of things of that nature. And our job kind of turned more to managing, the contracts and kind of utilizing their skill set, if that kind of makes sense.
Yes, thanks. Meredith, any observations?
Yeah, we definitely have an issue. As an example, I have a vacant position right now that we had to extend the posting to find someone qualified. And even then, there's not many to choose from, especially as it gets more into the electrical IT world. I can speak for North Carolina DOT. We are, we're civil engineer centric, if you will. The number of electrical engineers you could hold in, one hand basically in the departments as compared to the civil engineers. And then you add the IT piece to it, which jumps over into folks like David Offord in our IT or DIT section. So yes, that is a very small niche. It's specialized. DOT doesn't recognize that, electrical engineers generally get paid more than civil engineers. And so the pay grades are different. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay. Jed, any perspective from the city of Raleigh?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. Thankfully, we've had fairly low turnover rates. Part of it is we've repurposed a lot of existing employees with training and kind of established more, I would say, non-traditional civil traffic swim lanes for them. For example, we have a network crew now, and we had to send them, some of them, to classes. We have network splicing people. Usually that's a very high turnover field, network splicing with, I know the big cities, you have Google, Fiber, and ATT, and thank goodness we've had some stability there, but some positions are just going to be, by nature, have a higher turnover. With we've really kind of cast a wide net. We've also established like a CCTV program and have one individual that we've sent to training and really trying to shore up any weaknesses or deficiencies there. But a lot of what we're seeing is we're going from more traditional traffic / civil engineering into, at least on the operation side, network and programming type stuff with the switches and just the circuits that we have. So thankfully right now we haven't had too much of an issue with finding people and retaining them, but I do see going forward that being a problem. Just it seems like the IT field is one that's a lot more turbulent than some of the other more stable ones under my division.
Thanks, Jed. Ashley, last word, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. I kind of agree with the same statements that most everybody made, that it's definitely a specialty type program and work. Some of our maintenance staff are pretty highly electrical focused, but definitely like the fiber splicing and the fiber utilization, that's like a learned, I think, thing. And so it's really with experience, and we've been lucky as well to not have a real high turnover on the ITS front. So we're doing well, but yeah, we haven't really had issues with staffing right now. But I mean, we are all in a lot of different groups, and we all work well together and make this wonderful ITS program work.
Okay. Well, thank y'all. We're a few minutes after 12. Want to thank y'all all for your time and your expertise on this panel today. Great information, excellent presentations, excellent questions from the audience. So overall, a great success, and just wanted to express my appreciation and for your time and for your efforts. And we'll give you a virtual round of applause here for everybody that tuned in. Just a real quick reminder of the $5 raffle supporting the ITCS Scholarship Fund. Once again, the winner receives a $100 Amazon card. And then also come back for the general session at 2 o'clock on diversity and inclusion. It should be a really informative session. So please, everybody, come back if you have the opportunity to sit in on that. Once again, thanks to the panelists, and thanks to the audience, and everybody have a great St. Patty's Day. Enjoy yourselves, and everybody stay healthy. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.